Welcome to the Not the Top 20 podcast, the 1 to 24 league predictions for League 2, the 2024-2025 season. You are listening to the number one EFL podcast, and this episode is sponsored by AK Bets. He's George Ellick, I'm Ali Maxwell. And George, last year, League 2, well, no getting away from the fact that the team we picked to finish 24th bottom are now in League 1. They won promotion.
Most people were trying to sweep that under the carpet, but we were there at Wembley to see Crawley Town. I would say Crawley went from being probably the most widely anticipated club to get relegated, where it was almost a foregone conclusion. They were at such a short price with the bookies to get relegated, and their ascent from being the perceived basket case club in the league to getting promoted at Wembley, playing some of the most incredible, expansive football we've seen in League 2, I think shows not only how unpredictable League 2 can be, but also how difficult this is. Where, yeah, I think there are definitely teams that we can be fairly confident will be up towards the top end of the table. Although having said that, you know, Salford City, one of the big boys in League 2 last season, ended up in a relegation scrap for the most part, having been playoff team the year before. So it's difficult. We're going to do our best to go through it. We are very aware that we don't always get everything right, but it is great to be back here with you all EFL all season.
It's so good. And when you do a lot of research, you end up with a decent snapshot of each division in the EFL, and maybe you pick up on a couple of themes that we might expect to be a big part of League 2 this season. For me, the one that stands out is promotion pedigree in League 2 dugouts. Across the 24 managers, I make it 28 total promotions in their career across 14 of them. So more than half of the managers in League 2 to start the season have won a promotion before. 18 of those 28 are EFL promotions, and 10 of them are League 2 promotions. So you have the likes of Nigel Adkins with 4 promotions on his CV, 1 out of the Championship and 3 out of League 1.
Famously.
The Tranmere manager now. Carl Robinson, Darren Moore, Grant McCann, Paul Cook, they've all won League 1 promotion. Paul Cook has won 4 in total. Paul Simpson has won 3 in total. Derek Adams, 4 if you include 2 from in the SPFL. Dave Artell, Mark Bonner, Danny Cowley, Graham Alexander have all won promotion from League 2 before. And Simon Weaver, Andy Woodman and Mike Williamson have all won a National League or National League North promotion. George, last season we dubbed this the shark-infested waters. We felt Wrexham, we felt Stockport, we felt Mansfield, we felt Notts County looked really strong. This year, I think the Sharks are in the dugout.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, you know, we know when recording these episodes, we are going to get inundated with messages from fans who support teams, probably that we put between 14th and 24th, who'll disagree, and they will often point to their manager and say, have you seen who our boss is? Like, there's no way we're going to be that poor. And as you've alluded to there, those are managers who are respected, who have achieved at this level or above or beneath. Yet some of them are going to be perceived to have failed this season by the nature of the league. So yeah, it looks, it was very obvious during our research that it's much harder to say, well, they've got him. So like that has got to be a big step up on what's come before. And we have to look more into the minutiae of recruitment and whether or not those managers are good fits for the clubs they're managing. Also, I think what often gets missed, as well as the back end of last season, gives us massive pointers as to how a team are progressing. So
don't forget vibes.
And vibes.
Quite a big part of my research.
Big part of is vibes.
Yeah.
I actually don't do any research. I go purely off vibes.
Which is probably not the worst way of approaching things in League 2, which, as alluded to, we find incredibly unpredictable and pretty mobile. A lot of moving parts. George, new season for us and a new sponsor for us in AK Bets.
This is really exciting. Delighted to be partnering with AK Bets for this coming campaign. They are sponsoring the 1 to 24 shows. They're sponsoring all the betting shows for the whole of the 24-25 season. So massive thanks to them for supporting us, I guess. And we're really excited for a partnership with them. They are, if you hadn't heard of them before, they are, I would say, a bit of a disruptor in the current betting space.
Like a couple of guys I know. A couple of lower league podcasters.
Yeah.
Us.
Align
by
well.
the way. Yeah, us.
They're really good guys based out in Ireland. You can find their site, akbets.bet. They offer, all of the range of markets you would expect. We'll be recording our outright betting show next week, but do make sure you check them out. Crucially, they are a firm who I think would give a punter a bit more of a run maybe than some others. So if you haven't got an account with them and you find it difficult sometimes to get on, I would definitely make sure you check out AK Bets, and we'll be working with them. What's great is that they're a newer firm, I guess a smaller team than that we've worked with before, and hopefully that's going to mean that when it comes to the betting show for the campaign, we're able to work with them to make some really fun content together, and they can be a bit more nimble in terms of what they can offer and adapt to what we're putting up, and hopefully for the benefit of our audience, offer a service that should be a bit more bespoke to not the top 20 listeners.
Right, here we go. League 2 predictions, starting with the team in 24th place. And if this were to come to pass, it would be a double drop.
And we saw a double drop last season.
Yeah, we did.
From a team in Gloucestershire.
Yeah, we did. Forest Green Rovers, Cheltenham Town, 24th. What is it about teams from Gloucestershire that get relegated from League 1, George?
Well, there aren't that many comparisons, I wouldn't say, between the two. Like Forest Green came down last season with a squad that there's no way should have been down there. And they took a bit of a chance on an untested manager in David Horseman to come in and try and get them back there, and it didn't really work. I would say with Cheltenham, it's kind of the opposite, where they have had a big turnover off the field and on the field over the course of the summer. Gary Johnson is now their director of football, so seems to be managing everything on the football side of things. And they brought in Michael Flynn to be their manager, someone who's managed a lot of games at League 2 level with some success. Obviously at Newport, he did an incredible job. I would say that at both Walsall, despite some periods of good form, but at both Walsall and then at Swindon last season, it hasn't gone well at all. And given his affinity to Newport and the area and the club, I think there are alarm bells that are ringing when you've got a guy who's managed 2 other teams and has basically been sacked from both after alarming runs of bad form. You then look at the squad itself, and there's been a massive overhaul of players. Like it's basically a different team entirely to what we saw previously, and often that can be a good thing. You know, when you get relegated, it means your squad might not be good enough, and I completely accept that. When you look at the players that have been brought in, you've got Joe Day and Scott Bennett, who are clearly kind of allies of Flynn's from Newport County, and then players who, for my mind, are at kind of the wrong end of their career, whose career trajectory is very much on a downward ebb. Whether that is Ryan Bowman from Shrewsbury, a player who was once a very good goal scorer. He's had his health issues, but also just hasn't really looked mobile enough, I wouldn't say, to be a big force up front recently. Harry Pell, again, like talking of mobility, someone who's really lost any sense of that, and now I think struggles to really impact games in the middle of the park beyond basically fouling players. And they've lost some really good players. Like Luke Southwood was a massive player for them in goal when fit. Lewis Freestone at the back. Rob Street is that physical presence up front. Kind of losing players at good ages. And then at the other end of the spectrum, Liam Sercombe, who was such a key part of that good Darrell Clark squad last season. And that is the key for me as well, is that it's easy to look at what Darrell Clark did there last season and think, well, they only just went down. But like until Darrell Clark went in, they hadn't scored a goal. Like they were one of the worst League One sides we've seen. And I see no reason to think that the progression from Clark into Flynn isn't a massive downgrade. The squad looks weaker. In the dugout they look weaker. Alarm bells basically across the whole club. And kind of the biggest worry for me is that I don't think they see this coming. I think as a football club, they don't anticipate they're going to be in a difficult position. And that for me, like Forest Green, that's the big similarity, where if things go as we see it, then I can see them chopping and changing aggressively to try and make something work. There's no stability, and I'm really concerned for them that they could be the worst team in the league.
Sleepwalking towards disaster. That's how we see it. I could not agree more. I think they instantly look like one of the poorest squads in the league. And I think it is worth flagging up the fact that despite Cheltenham Town's recent League One history, despite their fantastic period under Michael Duff, as a club and as a budget at League Two level, I would suggest, and you can never be sure with budgets, that they are instantly, despite having been in the league above last season, a bottom 8 budget, possibly a bottom 6 budget. They will certainly have one of the lowest attendances in the division, and they're not a team propped up by a lot of cash from a benevolent owner. So for me, not a good squad, not a solid foundation, and I'm not necessarily sure I fully trust those making decisions at the top of the club. And with Flynn, I'm not sure, as you alluded to, that he's necessarily the motivational, dynamic leader that he was a few years ago, and that is a concern.
I also think with Flynn, there's a concern for me where when his team's gone bad runs, he seems not only unable to arrest them, but also seems to kind of check out a bit. And that's not really what you're after in a manager for this kind of scrap.
Well, Gary Johnson's the director of football. His brother has been brought in to help with recruitment. Of course, his son, Lee Johnson, is a currently available football manager, and you can't help but wonder whether if things don't start well, whether there might be a real Johnston nucleus, a greater Johnson nucleus to Cheltenham Town. We've got them finishing bottom, and above them we've got Accrington Stanley, another team with recent League One history that we think might be destined for non-league. Last season saw a huge change for Accrington Stanley. The departure, the sacking of John Coleman and Jimmy Bell, who had managed the club for over 10 years in that spell and in a previous spell around the same amount of time. The two men who, along with the owner, Andy Holt, built Accrington Stanley as a Football League club over the last decade and more, and it all ended fairly acrimoniously. The owner, Andy Holt, has been fairly dramatic with some of his comms, I would suggest, over the last 12 months or so, and fairly open in his dismay at the situation in the EFL when it comes to owning and running football clubs, the losses being accrued by his rivals, which make it harder for someone like him to run Accrington sustainably. And it comes to a sense, George, of being either unwilling or unable to perhaps compete on the same level in a budgetary term. And they've lost the managers that had brought everything together and who really had such authority around the place. So John Doolan is their manager. He's going to be backed up by Jed Brannan, who managed Morecambe last season. And Doolan came in a difficult position when Coleman and Bell left, but the results were really poor. They finished the season very poorly, ended up in 17th, but dropping like a stone. And this summer they've lost basically all the players that I would consider to have been their best players, which to me doesn't bode well. That's Tommy Lee, that's Joe Pritchard, Rosaire Longello, Jack Nolan. A lot of the technical quality in particular and the attacking quality is gone. They had some loanees that contributed well last season in Hills and Gubbins and Shipley. They've all gone back to their parent clubs. And in terms of replacements, Farron Rawson and Donald Love come in. Brandon knows them from Morecambe, experienced defenders. A goalkeeper, Michael Kelly, who had a tough time with MK last season. And probably my favourite thing that Aki have done is that they've just signed Boston United's strike force.
This was going to, if you moved on to me without saying it, I was going to say this feels like a really great throwback into how recruitment used to work.
It really does. Kelsey Mooney and Jimmy Knowles won promotion.
Jimmy Knowles, like what a name. So good.
And Kelsey Mooney is Tommy Mooney's son.
Brilliant.
Couldn't be better. They scored over 30 goals between them for Boston United last season, winning promotion from the National League North, and they've just been transplanted into League Two with Accrington. I love that. I can't wait to see how it goes. We should also mention that Aki are really committed to developing academy players, and they've got loads of young players who might come on again this season, and we'll be excited to track their development. The likes of Connor O'Brien, Alex Henderson, but also Dan Martin and Ben Woods as well. However, my general sense is that the party might be coming to an end when it comes to Accrington Stanley in the EFL. That pluckiness, that personality that they've had, for me, I think has been chipped away at, has been degraded, if you like. And they are likely to have the lowest attendance in the league this season. They are one of the smallest budgets in the league this season. I'm pretty sure they're going to struggle to compete. And I think they'll be heading to non-league in the next year to 3 years. We think maybe this season, second bottom and relegated Accrington Stanley. So that's a tough bit out of the way. But still a couple of teams.
You say that. I think anyone who's going to be spoken about in the next half an hour is still not very happy.
21st place, who?
22nd.
22nd place, go on.
Newport County, I'm afraid to say.
Right.
And this is quite a weird situation at Newport, where they've been fan-owned for a long time. They have punched above their weight in League Two for what feels, ever since they entered the league. And it felt to me like the arrival of Hugh Jenkins, the former Swansea owner, was going to be a kind of a landmark moment for them to progress. But from what we're seeing, it's hard to place them because a lot of their business, what we're seeing them do so far, we don't really know anything about.
Yep.
Graham Coughlin, I think, did a very good job to keep them safe and in mid-table for the most part last season. He was dispensed of at the end of the campaign. And we have Nelson Jardim comes in, who is a Portuguese coach, who was a coach at Swansea before. So it makes sense that Hugh Jenkins knows him and appoints him. It was a funny situation where he was initially brought in as kind of temporary manager to oversee pre-season, and then that very quickly became a full-time job, which Jenkins suggested was I think a visa issue or work permit issue rather than not being the plan the whole time, which we'll have to take at face value whether it's true or not. So we don't know much about him. He might be a genius. He might not be good enough. I think it's a massive risk for a side like Newport to bring in a coach who hasn't managed before. But we've seen it work many times. I wrote an article for NTT20.com 6 months or so ago about how first-time managers actually have a very, very good record in this league. But it's more the underlying numbers last season and the performances at the back end of last season were like aggressively bad. The worst team in League Two, I think, by a stretch, certainly in terms of XG ratio. And then watching them last season was a fairly desperate experience. And then you look at the business that they've done, where there are one or two players they brought in where you're like, okay, that is a pretty good signing for a side who are looking to consolidate. Courtney Baker-Richardson is the one. Anthony Driscoll-Glennon, a lovely left foot, a left back. These are players with a lot of League Two minutes behind them. But otherwise, we've got players. We've got players picked up on free transfers from Swansea and from Cardiff. Matthew Baker comes in, who's had a decent loan last season from Stoke. We have a keeper who used to be part of the United Academy, who's been at Castellon, who's come in after that, who we don't know much about. Players from Mikolova, from the Kimru Premier.
7 out of 10 of their signings have either never or barely kicked a ball in the EFL before.
So it might be.
It's quite Crawley Town 23-24.
Exactly. It might be great. Like I don't know enough about these players to know, but we have to do this on what we do know. And all I know is that looking at their squad from last season, looking at their performances from last season, I'd be worried about them anyway. And in Jardim and the signings they've made, it's very difficult for me to sit here and think, yes, this is going to work. So it might do. We have to go with what's at hand, and it does feel like there is a potential that they're taking huge risks, which may not pay off. So I'm pretty worried for them, and I guess Newport County fans have to hope that Hugh Jenkins knows what he's doing in all of these decision-making processes.
Yeah, new era, new Newport. I'm excited for the feeling of freshness and concern that it could be a complete disaster.
Yeah.
We've got Morecambe next in that 21st spot. Morecambe, the favourites for relegation. That is a status that they are more than used to and very, very comfortable defying. And we think that they will again this season. The first thing to say is that Morecambe are still a concern when it comes to off-field issues. The ownership group that has been in charge for some years now and under whom the club has experienced some pretty significant difficulties, some sanctions, a lot of slaps on the wrists from the EFL, and that is not over at this point. There have been noises of potential takeovers now for some time, but nothing actually concrete on that front. And the longer that continues, the more concerned we will continue to be about the governance of Morecambe and their sort of existence and ability to operate as a football club. However, as we sit here today, the best possible manager for this situation is in post, and that is Derek Adams. He is back at Morecambe for his third or fourth spell. He left them last season, just before the halfway point, just outside the playoff places. And last season, he had a squad that would not have been tipped to do very well on paper, just in terms of player quality. For Adams, that doesn't really matter. And in fact, I think he enjoys the ability to manage players who know that they would not have got an EFL contract at any other club. That is the case again for Morecambe. Almost the whole of their squad from last season was out of contract and was not retained, so they needed to sign a whole new squad, which they did, announcing I think it was, I can't remember how many signings, a lot of signings.
14, I think it was.
All at the same time, a couple of weeks ago. And
wouldn't mind that being just the general rule, although it would be difficult for our transfer writing on the website.
That would be difficult for NTT20.
One really hectic day.
So Adams has this squad. The standout names probably George Ray and Tom White coming in from Barrow. Adam Lewis as well, Callum Jones, Harvey McAdam, players there that I think could come on well for Adams. I just really trust him to keep them up. Yes, the squad is poor on paper, but you kind of know that they will fight for everything. You know that the way that they play and the individual player roles will just make sense. They won't be hugely complicated, but they probably will be quite effective. And I think that can take them away from the relegation zone. I'm worried about where the goals will come from in terms of individuals. Lee Angol, Hallam Hope, Jordan Slew, Charlie Brown. There's not great goal-scoring pedigree there. But with Adams, I just trust him. I believe in him, and I think Morecambe will finish above the drop zone. We've got them finishing 21st, and above them, George Harrogate,
who are, I think last season were one of the hardest teams to get a handle on, because I think there were periods last season where Harrogate were not playing well and were picking up points, and in every game they were kind of being battered in open play and were finding crazy ways to score goals and get points. And I was very concerned for them. And then they went on that run in the middle of the season where suddenly it turned. And they were picking up points more regularly. They were winning games, and they were doing so in a means that looked kind of sustainable. And then they had that one thrashing against Swindon, which kind of put paid to their playoff charge. And then it dropped off again hugely. Like, they've got to be the side in League Two last season who showed themselves to have the potential to play incredibly well, but also be one of the worst teams in the whole league. And that, I think, is understandable when you consider what an incredible job it is from Simon Weaver to basically get them to be safe consistently in League Two anyway. Like, this is a team without much in terms of investment. When you look at the club, and it's not a level playing field that they're competing on. So it makes sense that he's having to rely on moments of inspiration and quality rather than general inspiration and quality. But how long can that keep you safe for? And I kind of argue that probably long enough when there's only two teams going down and Weaver's there. Like, it wouldn't be a massive surprise to me if relatively soon it all comes crumbling down at Harrogate and they're not able to force their way into getting those points that they need. When you look at the business this summer, it worries me more than anything. I think Abraham Odo was an inspired signing last summer, and I know Rochdale fans are pretty perplexed to see him suddenly come to Peterborough, but Peterborough don't get these kind of signings wrong very often. They are very, very good at identifying good attacking talent and nurturing them, and he'll be a big miss. They got a lot of minutes out of him last season, which in that role you don't necessarily always get. Odo played over 3,000 minutes in a kind of attacking role, and was very good for the most part for them. So that is a concern. Also,
all eyes on Stephen Duke McKenna to be the Odo replacement. Showed some decent signs in the last month or two of the season with Sutton.
But it's not that easy to find a player, recruiting a player when you're Harrogate who is going to go to one of the best teams in League One at recruiting attacking talent isn't easy. Rob McDonald obviously moves on as well to Notts County, which is a big miss. So
rod.
So you've got a massive defender.
Literally and figuratively.
Both, and a diminutive, albeit important, attacking player moving on. And they haven't really replaced them with any proven quality. There's a centre-back's come in from Maidenhead. You have to trust, I guess, their processes in doing so. So this is a squad that could easily get relegated, but a manager who has just continues to do incredible work at Harrogate, and I think that's why we've got them outside the drop zone. Yeah,
above them, we've got Swindon in 19th, which is where they finished last season. It was their lowest finish for a long time, and it was pretty doom and gloom at the end of last season. Now, somehow two things are true here. Somehow, I think that the doom and the gloom has lifted somewhat, and I agree that there is a positive feeling of freshness and a slight change of approach that I think is positive for the club to stop the slide that we've seen over the last few years. However, still, overall, and in the context of all the other teams that we're talking about, we couldn't get them any higher than 19th. So here's the context. Mark Kennedy is the manager now. They basically had the whole of the second half of last season with Gavin Gunning as a kind of semi-permanent interim. We knew he wasn't really the long-term choice, so it all just felt like a bit of a waste of time. They've ended up with Mark Kennedy. His spell with Lincoln was okay, not great, not terrible. I don't really have a strong opinion on Kennedy himself, and therefore the quality of his management of this team will have a big difference on whether Swindon might massively overachieve this prediction or whether it might be fairly spot on. Big squad churn this summer. 10 of the 11 most minutes makers from last season are gone, and the one that remains, Saidu Khan, has some questions over his future. 14 of the 17 players that played the most minutes for Swindon last season are gone. Now, in and of itself, that is not a massive issue. It was a poor team and they didn't play very well. And I quite like the way that they've gone about building this squad. Certainly a much bigger onus on height and physical strength and sturdiness, and they have lacked all of those things over the last few years. So Will Wright comes in, having just won promotion from Crawley. Ryan Delaney, Grant Hall will be stronger penalty box defenders, you'd think, than what they are replacing. Rosaire Longello is one of my favourite players in League Two, and I do think he's got a bright future ahead of him if he can find the right position and the right manager. Ollie Clark, promotion with Mansfield last season. Harry Smith, huge target man up front, and they've got a couple of young players like Sean McGurk and Paul Glatzel that I think could come on well if they can stay fit again, and if Kennedy can find the right place for them. So it's difficult, really. How much of an issue is all this squad churn and the change of manager? It just creates a bit of uncertainty. They were a very poor team last season. There's still some unhappiness about the way that the club is being run off the field, the various aspects of the decision making, and I guess the communication as well from the owner and those around him. I think that the floor of the team is going to be higher. I think they will be
floors and ceilings
sturdier than they were last
sturdier
season.
Floor.
Yeah, just
Lovely.
A stronger foundation.
That's good. It's a new level to your floors and ceilings.
Reinforced floor.
You're actually talking not only about the levels but also the strength of them as well.
There's a bit more beef in the floor.
You'll be talking about glass ceiling soon.
But we're not sure exactly what the ceiling holds. So Swindon are 19th, and above them, George, a newcomer. Welcome to the EFL. Welcome to the pod, Bromley.
Always tough for us to assess promoted National League teams. We don't pretend to be National League experts. Do you pretend to be a National League expert?
Well, I think we're quite good at assessing them, actually.
But we do our research.
Yeah.
We do our research. And important to always remember that teams who get promoted from National League into League Two just don't get relegated.
Don't get relegated.
Doesn't happen. And they also normally don't win the league either, even when they're favourites.
So
there's
there's 21 spots we can place a promoted team from the National League, from second to 22nd.
Yeah, Wrexham came second last season, didn't they?
Third.
Yeah, they're third in the end.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mansfield.
Can't remember anything. It's so long ago. Bromley. So the interesting thing with Bromley is they come up, and they're obviously an EFL new boy. We don't know loads about them. It feels like they're probably here for a nice brief stay a la Sutton. But you look at their recent finishes under Andy Woodman. They finished 7th, then 10th, then 7th, and then 3rd in the National League, which suggests a pretty consistent level that warrants their arrival in the National League, and might suggest to me that it wasn't just a one-season flash in the pan that enabled them to get up into the EFL. The first thing to mention about Bromley is their style of play, and this is where the comparisons with Sutton kind of continue, where it's going to be attritional. It's going to be route one. It's going to be fairly direct, and they're very, very adept at it as well. Like, they do not concede many goals at all. So really strong defensively, good from set pieces. They finished 3rd last season on 81 points, which is a pretty good haul, albeit it does feel like the National League last season was maybe a weaker renewal than what we've seen in recent times, especially outside of Chesterfield. And then in their recruitment, it's kind of quality over quantity, where they've kept the core of their squad, which is a good thing, because I think if you come 3rd in the National League, then I would say by definition you're probably better than the relegated teams out of League Two. So I think we can immediately elevate them above the bottom 4 or 5. Omar Shomi comes in, who we know from last season at Sutton is both a pretty dominant defender and also a massive set-piece threat, which should suit.
Yeah.
And then Denanga is the one I'm really excited about, who had an amazing goal-scoring start to his season last season when Mike Williamson was still at Gateshead. That dropped off a little bit when Williamson left, but he's someone who clearly deserves a shot in League Two. So, I think continuity is the key here. Like, we've got a side who have been very consistently good in the National League, who come up retaining all their key players, retaining their manager, a couple of additions who should elevate what they've already got, and therefore we have them clear of relegation. And it wouldn't be a massive surprise to me if they surprise us and go a bit better than where we have them.
2 words for you: Michael Cheek. Michael Cheek
Cheeky.
is Bromley's striker. He has scored 151 goals in the last 9 seasons, all in the National League, and he gets his shot at the EFL. And you know what they say about goal scorers and the English pyramid system, George? The goalposts don't move.
They don't.
And he knows where they are.
Yeah.
He knows where the goal is.
Correct.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Cheeky. Tranmere, we've got in 17th, which I will admit to even coming as somewhat as a surprise to me. the placer.
I don't know what happened last year.
Because they finished 16th last year. We've got them finishing a place lower. It doesn't necessarily follow what felt like an upwards trajectory and trend under Nigel Adkins. When he came in, or from the point when he came in, Tranmere had the 8th best record in the division. However, what was it based on? Well, we like underlying numbers, and they suggested that Tranmere, in terms of the quality of the chances that they gave up and those that they had, were not a particularly strong and consistent team. What they did have was the best young player in the league in Rob Apter, one of the most brilliant individual attacking threats in the league, and he goes back to Blackpool. So there is a Velociraptor-shaped hole in Tranmere's squad. They have a Nigel Adkins in charge with great pedigree and great energy, and they have done a few bits and bobs in the transfer market. I like the signing of Sam Finley for sure. They haven't lost anyone major from the core last season. There's a part of me that would almost want a little bit more of a churn, to be honest, to try and refresh things a little bit. But Cameron Norman and Josh Davison, Declan Drysdale come in with League Two experience. A couple of wild cards. Sol Solomon signs from Marine, non-league club, and people on NTT20 squad that follow non-league football in the Northwest really excited about Sol Solomon as a bit of a Rob Apter type, actually, just a really dribbly 1v1 wide player that hopefully might be able to replace some of Apter's output. So I'm a little freaked out by the poor performance data from last season. I think overall the squad is fine and sturdy, but I'm not sure if I see as much of a leap up to the top or the top half of the table as I maybe expected before I started doing the research for League Two. I think they lack a bit of X factor, and that might just cap them somewhat. 17th, Tranmere.
So from Tranmere, we now get to a team, again, might be a bit of a surprise to some, losing a playoff finalist last year in League Two, Crewe Alexandra.
Yeah, Crewe Alex, 6th last season, and what a fantastic season it was. Lee Bell oversaw a magnificent campaign, turned around what had been a bit of a slide for the club in the previous seasons, did so playing good football and did so in a very impressive manner. It wasn't based on particularly strong underlying performance data, so that is the first thing to bring up. It's the sort of thing that winds a lot of people up, but it is also the sort of thing that we think can be quite a good measure of long-term performance. And the facts are that Crewe were a team who, particularly defensively, were quite leaky, gave up a lot of chances, didn't have necessarily the strongest out-of-possession shape or structure, and going forward, they were pretty hot and cold in terms of their chance creation and their finishing as well. An issue for me is what they've lost. Really important players for Crewe Alex, both in terms of quality of their play and also their place in the dressing room. That's Luke Offord and that's Rio Adebisi, two academy products, which is what Crewe do better than any team at this level, who became absolutely key players for them. Offord missed a chunk of last season with injury and moves on to MK Dons. Adebisi gets the move up to Peterborough in League One. They've also lost their two number 9s from last season in Elliot Nevitt and Courtney Baker-Richardson. I like both of those players, and they've been replaced by Omar Bogle and Kane Hemmings, who are also two players with a lot of experience at this level. I don't think they've necessarily gained a huge amount there. I don't think they've necessarily lost a huge amount there either. I am excited about the addition of Jack Lancaster, who's
so am I.
a left-footed attacking player who came in from Cambridge. One of those guys who I've always thought looks great, doesn't necessarily have the goals and assist numbers to boot, but was playing in what's been a pretty poor attacking side in Cambridge at the level above for the last few years, and I think could really thrive playing for Crewe in League Two. They have got a group of like 18 to 20-year-old academy players who have the potential to become the next nucleus, the next core of this team, and they've had some famous groups like Perry and G and Charlie Kirk, Ryan Wintle, etc. I'm talking about Booth in goal, Taberner in midfield, Holacek, Billington and Williams in defence, and then a couple in Finney, Lunt and Aegis that we haven't seen too much yet. There's there's a lot of ifs here. You need a bit of a leap of faith to believe that those guys can come in and as a unit become a really strong core of a League Two team. And I don't think we have that necessarily on our own agenda. I'm a bit worried about just general reversion. It was only a +4 goal difference last season, which is very low for a team finishing in 6th. And yeah, only 2 of their 8 most used players from last season remain. So there we go. Crew Alex, we've got from 6th to 16th.
15th, Grimsby Town, who had a torrid season last season. It spelled at the end of Paul Hurst's second spell in charge of the club. And David Artell came in, which I still believe is a very, very strong appointment, although it didn't necessarily go to plan. There were good signs initially as he tried to change the style of play, and then results tailed off, and it kind of felt like he had to revert back to a more agricultural style in order to get them the points they needed to get over the line. I'd be very, very surprised if we didn't see a return to relatively expansive attacking football coming up this season. And I think the recruitment of George McEachran suggests exactly that, because he's just the kind of technician in midfield who I think Artell will absolutely love, someone who can dictate the tempo of play, someone who can get them playing on the front foot. However, there are players that they've lost, and there's no denying that certainly in Clifton, but also in Gavin Holohan and to probably a lesser extent Malarkey, they've lost 3 key players there who've all gone to League One. And when you are a team that finishes down towards the bottom end of League Two and you lose 3 players to League One sides, that suggests to me that it's a pretty important part of your side that's been taken away. What I would say is that in Daddy Svan Thorsen, they have a player that I am very excited to see.
Correct.
I've never watched him play football beyond some clips, but anyone who has any access to the underlying numbers in Iceland has suggested that he is some talent and that it's a massive coup to get him in at League Two level. And it's great to see a side like Grimsby taking not a chance, but looking to recruit in a different way and understanding there will be players available for money that is totally unavailable when you're recruiting from the UK. Like, you can go out and you can recruit players of a certain standard for pennies. And I think if this is a good signing, if Svan Thorsen does prove to be as good as we're told he is, then we could see more League Two sides going this way. The reason I don't have Grimsby higher is purely because it feels like it could be a consolidation season. It could be like, this is Artell's first season in charge. We are going to develop our style of play. We are going to look to recruit differently and freshen up the squad and provide a platform for next season to really kick on. But there's lots to like. There's no doubt about it. My one concern, again, as is often the case in League Two, is that given what happened with Artell through some of his reign last season, if things don't start great, he could come under some pressure pretty quickly, which wouldn't be conducive to building gradually.
Yeah, lots to like is a phrase that I'd use to talk about Walsall. But again, we've got them in 14th, which would be a drop of 3 positions from last season. So I always find it hard to know how to pitch my tone, because I'm wary that with Crewe, with Grimsby, certainly with Tranmere, and now with Walsall, these are certainly lower positions than I think the general level of expectation within the fan base. And yet there are lots of things to like. And I guess as we go, we'll be able to explain what we like more about the other clubs that we've got above them. For Walsall, first thing that you have to say is it is objectively nuts and great that the team with the nickname the Sadlers have a manager called Matt Sadler and a newly appointed CEO called Ben Sadler.
Incredible.
What is going on?
I think that's
not even a particularly sort of like widely known surname.
Rumours that Simon Sadler's about to buy them as well.
So really leaning into the Sadlers aspect of their identity, which is nice. They have lost my favourite of their players from last season, Isaac Hutchinson, to Bristol Rovers in League One. They have replaced him, I think, about as well as they probably could have done by bringing in Charlie Lakin, who was putting up absurd numbers in the last few months of last season for Sutton. A couple of other additions, Connor Barrett and Albert Adoma, I think will be taking some right wing-back minutes. David Okagbu, who was there on loan last season, joins permanently. Young centre-back from Stoke, Tommy Simpkin as well, will be their loney goalkeeper, and they need to get more out of their goalkeeper this season. It was an issue for them last time out. When I say lots to like about Walsall, it's because I like the general trajectory of the club. I like what I feel about those that are running the club and the general the care that they are the care that they are taking running the club and in how they make their decisions. They have like a dozen players between 20 and 25 years old, lots of whom I quite like and I think could potentially kick on and be good players for this level and beyond. But that is all, it's all with development. It's all if they come on again. And if they all kick on together, I could see this going much better than we're predicting. But it's only cautious optimism at this point, and I want to see a Walsall side under Matt Sadler that I really believe in over a consistent period of time rather than just a few bursts which we saw last season. Does he stack up well against the other managers at this level? In my eyes, in terms of authority, record, but also just sort of how I perceive his sort of tactical ability and innovation, not massively for me. And at the very top of the pitch, as we record, Jamil Matt, Danny Johnson, Josh Gordon, it's not a strike force that gets me that excited. So Walsall in 14th. Above them, team from last season's League One.
Carlisle. Yeah. With Carlisle, the headline seems to be new ambitious owners going for it a bit and probably going to be right up there. And I guess I could see that. But like when you look at the players that they brought in, some of them are quite striking names. Like Aaron Hayden in from Wrexham is clearly a defender who's done well over the last couple of years. Charlie Wyke is a striker who has scored a lot of goals at a high level in the past. Terrell Thomas played a lot of minutes for Charlton League One last season. Ethan Robertson, another one who's got a big reputation. I'm not convinced any of these players have actually performed particularly well in recent times. Like it feels like names rather than recent performances. And given that Carlisle kind of made a big point about how they're going to use StatsBomb data in order to make their signings, it's a bit surprising to see them go down this route. However, there's no denying that the pedigree is there. The more, and I should also say that in Paul Simpson, they have a manager that it's impossible to not think incredibly highly of him. And I know that there are a lot of Carlisle fans out there who think so long as we have Simo, we're going to be absolutely fine. Like he is someone who, when he's Carlisle manager, makes us into promotion hopefuls. And that might be true, but also...
And he has literally won promotion with Carlisle 3 times before. So you can see where they're coming from.
Also relegated last season.
It's the same way that you think Michael Appleton's the greatest manager of all time because...
He's going to be a great loans boss at Manchester United.
Because he built a good Oxford United team. Because you've seen it. And they've seen it with Paul Simpson thrice.
For sure. But then it comes back to what you said at the beginning of the pod, that there are a lot of managers in this league who've won a lot of promotions. So I think the striking thing for me is that seems to be forgotten is that last season Carlisle United got 30 points from 46 games. They had a goal difference of minus 40. They conceded 81 goals. So they are starting at an incredibly low ebb. Like they were a much worse side than Port Vale, than Fleetwood, than quite clearly Darrell Clark's Cheltenham. So yes, they may have made key additions, but I don't think it's as easy as now saying, well, therefore they should be right towards the top end because they've got a lot of quality to make up just from those relegated teams. So I think mid-table feels about right. I'm sure they will go again in January when it comes to recruitment. I think Simpson is eminently capable of keeping them out of trouble, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that actually there's a lot of noise around them that's avoiding the issues that they were a very poor team last season and maybe the recruitment isn't quite as good as it looks.
Big jumper now. Big jumper, not what you're wearing with the NTT20 logo on it. Beautiful as it is, our new logo.
Thank you.
But a big jumper in terms of finishing 22nd last season and predicted to finish 12th, a jumper 10 places. Colchester United. I am pretty high on Colyu and the Cowleys, who came in last season where for what felt like the 5th season in a row, Colchester United were floundering, circling the drain of League Two. And the Cowleys got to work pretty quickly and built a much more competitive team, a team that drew a lot of matches rather than won a lot of matches, but who secured safety, which was desperately needed. They have lost some good players. Jaden Fevrier, who was the sort of dribble king in League Two last season, he moves up a level with Stockport. Connor Hall, Cameron McGeehan, these were good players for Colyu last season. Goodman, the goalkeeper as well, the loney keeper. But I think they've replaced them with quite good players as well, from Matt Macy in goal to Flanagan and Goodliff, big, strong, Cowley-esque centre-backs. From Rob Hunt, who's won 2 promotions from this level. Jack Payne as well, for a bit of extra quality in midfield. John Kaimani Gordon, who I think is a young wide forward that could feasibly catch fire in the right role, in the right team. And Lyle Taylor is back at this level again. I don't know whether he will score 0 goals or 20 goals, but I'm excited to find out. I expect Colyu to be so much better out of possession. I expect them to have a good defensive record. And I actually think they're quite stacked in attack. I don't always trust the Cowleys to build a really good attacking team in terms of the system and the patterns of play, but I think individually they have got quite a lot, whether it's Payne, Kaimani Gordon, as I mentioned, or the existing players, Matt Jay, Connor Wilkinson, Samson Tavide, Tom Hopper, Bradley, Ian Vian. They've got players that I think could feasibly be part of a good attacking team, and there's a lot of improvement to be done. Last season, against teams in the top 14 places in League Two, their record was 3 wins, 5 draws, 20 defeats. But I believe that under Cowley, this will be a very, very different Colchester United team. We've got them finishing bang in the middle of the table, 12th. Take me to 11th, George. Take me there in a wheelbarrow. It's Barrow.
Amazing campaign from Barrow last season. Like, they were on the brink of automatic promotion for the most part. Incredible achievement from Pete Wild to get them there. And then it all fell apart, culminating in dropping out of the playoffs altogether on final day, which felt incredibly harsh for a team that looked like they were the disruptors in League Two for a while. What came next, I don't think we anticipated or expected, where Wild was dispensed of. Stephen Clements comes in.
They were very keen to say, we did not sack Pete Wild.
Yeah.
But it's fair to say it's been a little bit confusing.
A little bit confusing. I mean, as is a team that play their games in Barrow training in Manchester. I mean, the whole club is like relatively confusing, but relatively...
And their new sponsor is the region of Newfoundland in Canada. That's their sponsor, which is also really confusing, but seriously cool.
Maybe we should reach out to some states.
Yes, please.
But yeah, so they're kind of hard to get a grip on, because you're like, do you associate all of their successes in the last couple of seasons to Pete Wild? Or do you think actually this is a club that are ambitious, which we've always said, like the perception of Barrow in League Two is that they're plucky Barrow, they're kind of a Harrogate or a Sutton, and that isn't the case. When you look at their spend, you look at the way they recruit, they are way more ambitious and have more resources to try and achieve than that. When you look at the transfer business, there are some concerns. You know, their centre-back duo of Chester and Ray have moved on, who was so good for the most part last season. Whitfield has gone up to League One as well. But they have some sneaky signings, I think, again, suggest that plucky little Barrow are actually not heavyweights, but can carry their weight at
middleweights.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at Conor Mahoney on a permanent after a very good loan spell at Gillingham last season, Ben Jackson, who started a lot of games in the Championship for Huddersfield in the past. Like, these are permanent signings at League Two level that, you know, whether they're good or not, we'll see. I think Mahoney certainly will be, but certainly they are statements that they are able to compete with good clubs at the level. Also, interesting loanees brought in from Everton, Blackburn and Huddersfield that we don't know about, but it does feel like maybe the shift away from Wild and a certain style of play in a pretty... negative is the wrong word, but like, you know, there were low margin games for the most part when Wild got his way. They might be looking to do something a bit more progressive. With Clements, I think we saw some signs that he is a capable coach at Gillingham. I wouldn't say it was all doom and gloom, despite the fact that Gillingham fans, I don't think, particularly rated him. He came in mid-season, had to take over quite a weird squad, playing a very certain style, was basically told by the owner, Brad Gallinson, he had to completely shift that overnight, and then was sacked for not really doing it. It felt a bit harsh on him. Barrow have clearly seen something they like in him, so I'm kind of excited. I don't see why there should be, you know, whilst I'm a fan of Wild, I don't think they're going to suddenly go from being a challenger to down in the nether regions of the league, and I think their recruitment suggests that they are ambitious enough again to try and challenge at the top end.
Notts County were not as good as we thought they were going to be last season. We had them bouncing straight back up, I think. Well, not straight back up, bouncing up again. Double promotion. They finished 14th. They really tanked. And that was partly down to the departure of their manager, Luke Williams, up to the Championship. But actually, the performances had started to dip quite freakishly before Williams departed. Stuart Maynard was left holding the baby, and it's fair to say that the baby kept crying for quite a while in Maynard's first few months. I would say he did manage to drag things back a little bit towards the end of the season, but still a really disappointing trajectory throughout the campaign from Notts, who finished 14th. And it's difficult to know exactly how good or not they are going to be. A lot depends on Maynard and what he's able to do with a full pre-season. He had a reputation at Wealdstone of being an excellent tactician, of being able to play excellent technical football, which is what Notts County want, but also building good teams without necessarily the sort of starry names in the division. But he does have star names at this level. He still has Jody Jones. He still has Dan Crowley. He still has David McGoldrick to work with, and that is a lot to work with. What he doesn't have is Macaulay Langstaff, who was top goalscorer in League Two last season. So currently no replacement signed, but Alassane Jatta, who came in January, is looking quite lively in pre-season. They've lost a few other bits and bobs, John Bostock being a name that stands out. And then it's a full revamp of their defence. And this was massively needed because they were pretty much the worst defensive team in the league last season. So Matty Platt, Concrete Rod McDonald, Jacob Badeau, all good, solid League Two defenders, more about defending than passing out the back. And so I'll be interested to see what Notts lose in terms of their build-up play, because they were a sensational attacking team last season, a brilliant possession-based attacking team for League Two. So how much worse will they get going forward at the cost of a stronger defence? That's a big, big question. If Notts are to be in the top 7 or win promotion, they need to concede at least 20 goals fewer. And we'll see if this new look defence and a manager with a bit more time to drill his team into his style of play, see if that comes to pass. We've got Notts in 10th. If you told me that they would be 5th, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me that they'd be 15th, I wouldn't be surprised either. Quite a volatile team, I reckon, Notts County. Above them, I'd say a similar thing about Fleetwood George.
Yeah, Fleetwood, you and I disagree on. I've got my way.
Peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, I mean,
they don't want to see mum and dad argue.
I think firstly with Fleetwood, there's an underlying numbers angle to this, where last season their underlying numbers were mid-table in League One, and they were one of those teams that, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying that the XG ratio stuff is the be all and end all, but for whatever reason they were one of those that performed way under their expected goals ratio, and that, when you couple that with the fact that they've never really been in relegation trouble in League One before, suggests to me that they come down from League One as a pretty good side. There's then Charlie Adam, where I probably didn't anticipate that Charlie Adam would be a particularly good appointment, probably because of some prejudices about, the fact that he's an ex-pro who we didn't know much about, and Fleetwood have done this quite a lot, where they just appoint ex-pros as managers without much pedigree behind them. Joey Barton, Stephen Craney, to mention a couple. And Adam did really well. He improved them both in terms of when you watched them play, their underlying numbers improved massively, and it wasn't enough to keep them up, but it was enough for me to say, right, okay, he's someone that I'm pretty willing to accept or to look at as a head coach or a manager who's got quite a lot about them. And then when you look at the transfer dealings, like, yes, they've lost Promise Omashere to Bristol Rovers, but he doesn't play loads of minutes anyway. He's like a very exciting attacking player who I think will do well, but he's not a massive loss. Kean Hayes spent last season on loan in the National League. He's gone to Peterborough now, but wasn't a big part of their side. Jaden Stockley is someone who played a lot of minutes for them, but didn't do particularly well. So apart from that, they've kept a lot of players who I would consider to be really good League One players. Ryan Broom being one of them, Adam Mayer another. In terms of goal scoring, it looks like they might need a bit more, but there's been a change of ownership at Fleetwood with
has it?
Well, yes. Yes, there has been.
Yeah, so the owner is Jamie Pilley,
the son of Andy Pilley.
Yeah, his dad was the previous owner.
Exactly.
For the last 20 years before he was sentenced to 13 years in prison for fraud.
I would almost be more concerned if the sale had not been within the family, because that suggests to me an element of continuity where things aren't really changing in terms of the funding of the club. It seems like they're still able to conduct transfer activity. They're still able to recruit certain players. So, yeah, this is a big one where, like, relegation, Charlie Adam, losing key players, former owner in prison, sold to the Sun. Like, there's a lot there. It's like, oh God, it's they're the basket case. But I actually think the reality on the pitch is that they were okay last season, got a bit unlucky, looked to be recruiting fairly well, and I think they should be fine in League Two next season.
Okay. Worth pointing out at this point that going out on Friday on NTT20.com, the day that the first ball is kicked, Friday the 9th of August is going to be a 1 to 24 extra episode. George and I are going to be talking through some of our major disagreements that we had when mashing together our own 1 to 24s. George, keep on talking and talk to me about Salford City, managed by Carl Robinson.
Yeah, Carl comes in at Salford last season and does pretty well. He's someone who very much needs to get his career back on track, I would say, after a very good spell at Oxford that kind of descended into not a particularly good time at Oxford. He is a manager who I really think is capable of, especially early on in 10 years at a club, is capable of doing very well at Oxford. It was seasons, initially it was quite difficult, but there were seasons of success that came after that. And he came in at Salford last season and immediately improved them. I think he's a better fit for the club, where he's someone who is able to manage big egos and big characters, of which they've got quite a lot. And it's easy also to forget that going into last season, Salford were fairly well fancied. They will still have one of the highest wage bills in League Two. The ambition is still there for them to climb up the leagues. In terms of their recruitment, it kind of echoes that, whether you like the recruitment or not. Like Ben Woodburn is someone that I know, having spoken to him when he was an Oxford player, that Carl Robinson thinks is an incredible talent. I don't think we've necessarily seen that. I think at Preston in the Championship he didn't really show it, but there's no denying that at League Two level he's someone that if Carl Robinson can get the best out of him, should be a big player. Tom Edwards comes in at right back, a guy who's played a lot of minutes in his career at a higher level than League Two. Cole Stockton is the kind of player that I can imagine Carl Robinson getting the best out of, where we've seen him score a lot of goals in the right environment. I think he will breathe belief into him and encourage him to do what he does and basically shoot from anywhere, whether that's the detriment to the team or not. But the two signings I really like are Stefan Negru and James Chester. Chester showed last season at Barrow that he's still very capable of being a good defender at the level. Stefan Negru is someone on loan from Oxford who Carl will know well, who was very good in League One last season at Oxford and has a massive future. And I'm really surprised as an Oxford fan that he's gone to League Two. So I think we can basically draw a line through last season and expect them to be upwardly mobile again, playing good attacking football with a squad and a budget that is probably a top 7. So I think they'll bounce back from what was a really disappointing campaign last season.
Big jumper, Salford. 20th last season, we've got them in 8th. Now we hit the dotted line, above which we have the top 7, 4 playoff places and 3 automatic promotion spots. In 7th, we have AFC Wimbledon. Finished 10th last season. Johnny Jackson in charge for the 3rd season and has not always had it easy with Dons. Certainly in that first season, their first back down at the level, has both brought on and then sold some quite incredible attacking talent for this level in terms of Ayub Assal, in terms of Ali Al-Hamadi, and this summer has lost Jack Curry, another young player, a left-back, who has moved up 2 divisions to the Championship. So Wimbledon doing great work when it comes to developing players, when it comes to bringing in transfer revenue at a level where most clubs struggle to do that. Can they put together a team that finishes in the top 7? We think that they can. I think that the foundations are there. Defensively and the out of possession shape, really, really impressive last season. I see no reason why that would change this season. I love the centre-backs, Lewis and Johnson, who were brilliant last season, both signed from Stockport and should go again this year. I like the addition of Owen Goodman in goal to replace the departed Alex Bass. And in midfield, they lost Armani Little, who's a nice player for them last season, but they've added Alistair Smith and Callum Maycock, who I think both of whom could be interesting options as number 8s. Both of them are 6'4" plus as well. This is going to be a massive football team. From front to back, they have height, and I quite like that. They've got strong quad up top with Matty Stevens, with Joe Piggott, Omar Bugiel and Josh Kelly. I think that if those can all stay fit, that means that at the 65-70 minute mark of every single game, we can see 2 striker substitutions, and they can keep the pressure on, and they can play quick and direct and keep putting pressure on the back line. Strong at the back, strong in midfield. I think that the wing backs for me is kind of the weakest area of the pitch at the moment, and my main concern for Dons is that on top of that strong foundation, how much do I think they will be able to become a really strong attacking team that creates a lot of chances and has a bit of X factor? I'm not sure. I still think in this renewal of League Two, just that base level, that sturdiness, that physical strength will get them to be a really good a team with a very high floor, consistent. They're not going to concede many goals. A lot of zeros and ones in the goals against column, and that can take you quite a long way. 7th place, Wimbledon, and above them, Gills.
Gillingham finished 12th last season.
What?
I know. Having started the campaign so well, I basically hope that it was a huge learning curve for everybody at the club, because in Bragg Allinson they've got an American owner who seems to have really bought into the club, both in terms of big investment, being present there the whole time, engaging with fans, both in person and on social media, albeit it seems like he's going to try and do less of the second one. And I hope that, you know, he's realised over the course of the campaign that it's not easy. You know, the way that it was spoken about changing the style of play and bringing Clements in to do that, and things dropping off and the reactions after games, there needs to be like a way more like holistic approach to everything. And it kind of feels like in appointing Mark Bonner to work under Kenny Jackett, they should have that. You know, I think Bonner's a really, really good appointment. Somebody who's delivered a promotion already from this level with a much more unfancy side in Cambridge, who, you know, you and I are both mates with him, and we can attest that he's just a great guy to spend time with. I imagine the environment and the culture at Gillingham will massively improve for him being there. But I just really hope that he isn't just judged purely on, do you deliver promotion? Because it's not easy to do so. And he's someone who, I think, to elevate a team from 12th straight into the top 3 is a hard thing to do. I think they'll improve. I think clearly Gaddington is supporting Gillingham in doing that. I think Jack Nolan in particular is a really good and exciting addition, and Armani Little and Aaron Rowe as well. Those 3 I think will give Gillingham an energy and a quality on the final third, some ball playing ability that they've kind of lacked in recent seasons where it's been fairly route one. I think in Bonner you've got a manager who's happy to kind of change it up in terms of style of play. I think we'll see them go fairly direct at times, but I think he'll also want the technicians in advanced areas in order to enable them to unpick locks as well. So I think it would be incredibly harsh on Mark Bonner to expect him to come in and deliver it immediately. It's also, you know, as we spoke about in the Michael Flynn conversation earlier with Cheltenham, how does he get on away from Cambridge? It's the first time he's worked away from that club. He obviously has an incredible affinity and relationship with Cambridge United fans, having been brought up there, having been a Cambridge fan. This is a different challenge for him, and he won't have the same amount of patience or the immediate affinity with the fan base that he had there. So I hope and I think they will be progressive and good. I think they're in a much better place now than they were this time last year. I think they have a manager who should be able to deliver the ambition that the Gallinson has. But it's, as I keep saying, it's not that easy.
We got Vale 5th, Port Vale. They were relegated from League One last season. Darren Moore is in the dugout, and that gives me hope and positivity for Port Vale, and also some concern. So there's a bit of fun, because Moore did not have a great impact after he took charge of Vale. They were relegated really with a whimper, and they did not have the uptick of results that they would have hoped and expected when they hired a guy who had literally won promotion from League One the season before with Sheffield Wednesday. They have since put Darren Moore basically completely in charge of all football operations, and that's got some benefits to it, and that gives me cause for concern if things don't go very well. But he is a fantastic leader in many ways, and I do think in terms of being able to overcome relegation hangover, if you like, it's a good person to have at the helm. The transfer business has been pretty eye-catching, I would suggest. They've not lost a lot of key players or a lot of quality, I don't think, but they have added some in the form of Amos in goal, Hennigan and Hall, the centre-backs, who'll be big, strong centre-backs, which is what Moore likes. Ryan Crosdale, who's got real authority at the base of midfield, having been at Stockport for a few seasons. And maybe the biggest name signing in League Two this summer, I would go as far as to say, is the signing of George Byers from Sheffield Wednesday.
That's exactly what I've got in my notes as well.
To Port Vale. Wednesday fans can't believe it. League Two fans can't believe it. Byers wants to play for Darren Moore again, like he did at Sheffield Wednesday. And he'll be in the heart of a Port Vale midfield. And surely he's got too much quality for the level. They've added Ronan Curtis as well. I'm not entirely sure where he fits in what I think will be a 3-5-2 shape. But another good striker squadron in that we've got Jaden Stockley, target man. We've got Laurent Tolage, who was one of the most highly sought after strikers in the National League last season. Young striker from Aldershot, previous Brighton Academy player, which normally means there's something about him. Rory Payton joins, who scored a lot of goals in the lower leagues in Scotland in the last few years. And then there's probably the most exciting young player in League Two, Bailey DePepper, who is a really interesting striker. 17 years old, scored 3 goals for Vale in League One last season, scored goals for England youth teams over the summer, and is considered one of the best striker prospects of his age group in the country. So I'm hoping that the fact that Stockley and Talage and Payton have all signed doesn't mean that his minutes will be reduced, because if you have a player like that, you've got to play them. So I think they'll be pretty consistent, pretty sturdy. I'm not sure if I truly believe that they will have the absolute quality and the tactical impressiveness of the teams that we have above them. Thank you. Port Vale 5th, and above them,
Chesterfield, who...
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
The Spirites.
Yes. Paul Cook's their manager, who we know quite well. He's been a very good manager at the level before, albeit not with Liam Richardson by his side this time, but it didn't seem to matter in the National League, where they were totally and utterly dominant in the National League. One of the easiest, coziest winners we've seen in that league for a long time.
80 points after 31 games. Just a little 2.6 PPG there for the first 31.
But again, I find it really hard to work out how that translates into this, where I think they've been put in as bookie favourites. But, that looks to me like one of the poorer leagues. I mean, they're 7-1 favs with AK bets for League Two. Despite the fact that we haven't seen a National League winner win the league for a long time. I think the last to get promoted before Wrexham was Tranmere. So it looked like a weaker National League to me, but they were completely and utterly dominant within it. They haven't done loads in the transfer market, which isn't a massive surprise. I think, again, like Bromley, just keeping your team together who deliver promotion when coming up out of the National League is a pretty strong way to go about it. Che Dunkley comes in, Paddy Madden come in. I wouldn't say I love either signings, like both of them their best days behind them, but I guess offer some EFL experience, a bit of know-how, previous promotions and the rest of things. But with Cook there, it feels very unlikely there's going to be a massive drop-off. And unlike Luke Williams at Notts County, I don't think he's necessarily the kind of profile who's going to be poached if things start well either. So, I guess you have to translate their championship winning or National League winning champions. You have to equate that, translate that into probably top 6 League Two for the most part. Keeping the squad together, that's kind of where we got them in 4th position.
Absolutely. Into the top 3, the automatic promotion spots, and we kick off with Bradford City in 3rd. 5 years now at the level. They finished 9th, 15th, 14th, 6th and 9th. They have regularly been put towards the top of our and other people's 1 to 24s. What is it about Bradford City? Discuss another time. We like what we see with Bradford. Graham Alexander is the manager, and after he came in last season, it looked like a good fit for him and for the club. 49 points from 30 games under him, 1.63 points per game, which is playoff form, and we think they'll get better. Big addition this summer, off the field, David Sharp, who was previously Director of Football, among other job titles, at Mansfield, with Wigan before that. He is someone that I think will add some much-needed support and a bit of composure and a bit of experience and some good contacts to the football operations side at Bradford City. And it's the football operations side of Bradford City that I think has really fallen down over the last few years. So, really positive about Sharp's arrival, and I'm positive about the additions. They've added promotion experience. Anthony Sarcevic, I think, has 7 promotions on his CV. Neil Byrne, big player for Stockport over the last couple of years, really experienced, good solid defender. Callum Johnson as well, won promotion with Mansfield last season. But this is about what we saw at the end of last season for me, where Alexander managed to achieve something that predecessors hadn't, and that was to get Bradford City to look like a really dangerous and varied attacking team with goal threats outside of Andy Cook, who is still a really big goal threat at this level. I'm very excited for 2 young players that last season at the end of the campaign came on big time and were really good quality attacking players. Bobby Poynton, who's an academy graduate from Bradford, and Callum Kavanagh, who they signed in January. Both of those looked really dangerous last season. Even Jake Young and Tyler Smith, I think, could easily be good secondary attacking options off the bench for a team like this. And I think the structure behind will be strong, will be sturdy, will be good defensively, will be tough to beat. So the big question mark that people will point to is that Bradford City always get in their own way, that they can't get over the line, that the pressure from the fans is too much and they can't perform over 46 games. But I'm a believer, and you're a believer. And I think Bradford City might be back in League One for the first time in half a dozen years as of next season.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they are well set, and they're a team who, again, performances last season or results last season weren't good enough, but the foundations for me are quite clearly there. In second, though, because only 2 teams left now.
Yeah.
So they're waiting.
Yeah.
We've got MK Dons. MK Dons, who were humbled by Crawley Town in the League 2 playoff semi-finals last season. And I think a lot of the fan annoyance off the back of that embarrassment has probably subsided now. And MK Dons fans can look at the campaign as a whole and see the work that Mike Williamson did and see that this is an incredibly exciting project, of which that was only the first step. And I'd probably go as far as saying that for the sake of progress, maybe staying in League 2, maybe building a more dominant side in Williamson's ideology and image is the best way to go about getting up into League 1 and continuing their rise back up to as far as they want to go. It was an unbelievable baptism of fire for Williamson, where he came in midway through a season, had an incredible run, only to have that ridiculous playoff campaign. And I'm assuming that he'll probably learn a lot from those 2 games against Crawley. Liam Kelly comes in, who was, of course,
he's so good.
Maybe the most important outfield player for Crawley last season in terms of what he can do with the ball. He manipulates it so well. He's a great passer. And with Tom Carroll and him in midfield, are they ever going to lose the ball? Are they just going to retain possession throughout games consistently? I love the addition of Callum Hendry up front, a player who's shown in flashes what he's capable of. I think at some point he will catch fire, and maybe it will be in this MK Dons team. Maybe it will be in this MK Dons team.
Painful.
I hope the camera was on you there.
Max Dean, big shoes to fill, but they got a serious fee for him. One of the highest fees received for a League 2 player for a long time.
And also in Matthew Dennis, we saw a player who showed in flashes last season what he's capable of. And in Dennis, the new up-and-coming striker, Hendry can come in as well. And then you've also got Lawrence Maguire and then Lemon Havens from Stockport, 2 players who won promotions last season, just adding a little bit of know-how and a little bit of steel to their team too. So you've got 3 players, if you add Kelly to that, who won promotion out of League 2 last season. Yes, issues I would say at the back, like Dan Harvey leaving, not ideal. Warren O'Hora leaving, not ideal either. But they've got massive depth.
Let me present an alternative view. They were a bit of a shambles at the back last season, and that is clearly what they need to improve on. And they have taken strong steps to do that.
No, and they have.
Bringing in Offord from Crewe, bringing in Lawrence Maguire.
I agree.
Bringing in your man, someone else whose name I haven't got in front of me, Sam Sherring. Sam Sherring.
Yeah, no,
Need I say any more?
They've got massive depth there, and I don't think it's a big issue. It's just they're players who've been important at good moments for MK Dons over the seasons. The only reason, apart from the fact that we rate who we've got top, that they're not top is there's just a little thing that we both agreed on, and we thought about it separately, where teams who play attacking, expansive, passing, possession-based football at League 2 level generally get picked off a little bit sometimes. Like, they can dominate games, but when you're passing out from the back with players who who can be very good on the ball but aren't necessarily technically gifted enough to do that on pitches that are quite often pretty poor, against teams who will model their game plan mainly around physicality and aggression and energy, you can come unstuck. And it wouldn't surprise me if MK Dons were perceived to be the best team in the league next season, but have individual games where they fail to break down a low block and they get picked off when passing out from the back, and that means that they don't come top. But what a squad, what a manager, what a side. I'd be amazed if they're not in League 1 next season.
Nice. Donny Rovers, Doncaster with Grant McCann in the dugout are the first place pick for the 1-24s in League 2. Donny finished 5th last season. What a roller coaster it was to get there, because for most of the first half of the campaign, they were poor again. And it continued a trend from the last few years of Doncaster Rovers being poor. And then McCann who had never come under any pressure from the fan base because they know full well what a good manager he can be when a team of his gets going. His team got going. And the concern is, it seemed to coincide with the addition of some loanees. Adelican, Lotutala, Craig, all came in January, and from February onwards, they cracked out 10 wins in a row, and those guys were massively at the heart of that, and they have not returned, those loanees, but they have been very quick and very strong and very bullish in the transfer market, adding Billy Sharp, who will surely still be able to finish chances that are created, and I think it'll be a team that does create chances for its number 9. Harry Clifton and Joe Sabara and Jordan Gibson all offer quality in midfield and attacking midfield areas. Tom Nixon gets brought back, who's a nice versatile fullback. Sharman Lowe is the loanee keeper to fill the gloves of Lotutala, and I'm a little unclear as to what to expect from Sharman Lowe, so that could be an area where they drop off. I'm a little worried about the centre-back depth. Richard Wood is amazing, but he's very old. Joe Anderson's a good player, but is very injury-prone, so that might be an area where I'd like to see 1 or 2 more additions. But overall, I think Doncaster Rovers very clearly finished last season as the best team in League Two that didn't get promoted to League One. Mm-hmm. They experienced a complete shift in energy and mindset, and one that now leads me to believe that they are in the right position to challenge for the title. They have a great squad, they have a great manager, and I think a strong style of play that has all the positive aspects of a really good, technical, skillful attacking team that can build through the thirds, but can also go long, and will probably have a slightly sturdier foundation than perhaps MK Dons, who we have finishing second to them. Doncaster Rovers, top in the 1-24s. We got a terrible record of predicting the winner of League Two. So
should say as well that AK Bets are going top price for our selection there to win League Two. So yeah, industry top price, Doncaster 10-1 to win League Two. I'll run you through their market quickly. Chesterfield 7-1 favourites as mentioned. MK Dons 15-2. Gillingham 9-1. Doncaster 10-1. Port Vale 10-1. Bradford 12-1. So I think our top 6 are the bookies' top 6.
Oh wow! Okay.
Insight.
Well, we needn't have done all that research, really.
No, we should have just read out their list from start to finish.
Thank you for listening to this 1-24 for League Two. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, and if you're listening through Spotify in particular, if you'd be able to quickly take 10 seconds to leave us a 5-star rating, it makes a big difference to us, and it'd be much appreciated. If you want a bit more, let me point you in the direction of the 1-24 Extra, the bonus podcast for NTT20.com paid subscribers. That will be out on Friday the 9th. George and I debating the teams that we disagreed on the strongest, and handling some of your questions as well about our placements of your teams or other teams at the level. With a big thank you to AK Bets for sponsoring this podcast and for sponsoring the betting show every single Thursday from now until the last kick of the season. This has been our League 2 1-24s. You should be able to find ones for League 1 and the Championship in exactly the same place. Not the top 20 is EFL until the earth explodes. Go well.